For over 70 years, right from the moment it became a nation, Australia built its identity on something that honestly seems almost unbelievable today. We're talking about the White Australia policy. And look, this wasn't just some vague idea people had. It was a deliberate, full-on national project to engineer a very specific kind of society.
So, how on earth do you get from one of these statements to the other? I mean, really think about it. The journey between these two completely different visions of Australia, well, that's the story we're going to unpack. On one side, you've got this proud, modern, multicultural nation. And on the other, a really, really starkly racist vision from its own founders. It's this massive contradiction right at the very core of Australian history. Okay, so how did that vision actually become a reality? Well, it wasn't just a bunch of talk. Right after Australia's federation in 1901, the guys in charge got to work. They started building what you could call a legislative toolbox, all designed to make sure the new country would be, and would stay, exclusively white and British. Now, here's the thing you've got to understand. The White Australia policy wasn't just one single law you could point to. Nope. It was a whole collection of them, a complete program, that legislative toolkit I mentioned. And the absolute cornerstone, the main piece of the puzzle, was the Immigration Restriction Act of 1901. What's wild is how cleverly it was written. It avoided being openly racist, to avoid any trouble internationally. But its real purpose? Oh, that was crystal clear. And the most famous, or infamous tool in that toolbox, the dictation test. Honestly, it was a masterclass in hypocrisy. Here's how it worked. An immigration officer could stop anyone coming into the country and ask them to write 50 words. But here's the catch. In any European language, the officer chose. Just let that sink in. Not English. Any European language. It gave them total power to fail whoever they wanted, all while the law itself never even said the word race. And if you want a perfect example of just how ridiculous this got, look no further than Egon Kisch. This guy was a Jewish communist, and get this, he was fluent in several European languages. So how'd they stop him? They made him take the test in Scottish Gaelic. I mean, come on. It was a system literally designed for people to fail. And that's why, over nearly 60 years, only about 2,000 people were even formally given the test. Its reputation did the work. People knew they couldn't pass, so they just didn't even try to come. But look, a policy like this doesn't stick around just because of some laws. For it to really, really take hold, it had to become a cultural thing. It was basically a massive project of conscious social engineering, all aimed at creating a very specific national identity that would back up the laws. And that's how this powerful national myth was born. The Aussie bloke. You know the type. The ideal citizen was based on these archetypes, like the battler out on the frontier, or the larrikin, that cheeky guy who doesn't like authority. That was the image Australia was selling to the world and to itself. A tough, practical, and, crucially, an exclusively white character. And what that means is, by its very definition, this identity just had no room for non-white immigrants or even for the country's own indigenous peoples. And believe me, this wasn't some subtle, hidden thing. It was everywhere. The most popular magazine of the time, The Bulletin, had Australia for the White Man printed right on its masthead. There was a literal board game, I'm not kidding, where the whole point was to get the colored men out and the white men in. It was in songs and plays, even on a brand of canned pineapple. It completely saturated everyday life. But of course, nothing lasts forever. And dismantling this policy, well, it was a long, slow burn. The ice really started to thaw after World War II. A new fear took hold, this idea that Australia had to populate or perish. And that pressure forced the country to start, very slowly, rethinking where its new people might come from. So let's walk through the key steps. First, in 1958, that ridiculous dictation test, gone, abolished. Then came a really big one in 1966. The government started letting non-Europeans migrate based on their skills, not their race, and even offered them a way to become citizens. The final nail in the coffin, though, was in 1973. That's when the Whitlam government passed the Racial Discrimination Act, which basically made the whole idea illegal. And it's important to note that this pressure didn't just come from politicians in Canberra. It was fueled by these really public moments that just laid bare how cruel the system was. A perfect example is the case of a 5-year-old girl named Nancy Prasad. She was from Fiji, and they were going to deport her. It caused this massive public and international uproar, and really became a powerful symbol that helped shift public opinion. And you can see the impact of those 1966 changes almost immediately. Just look at the numbers. In 66, about 1,900 non-European settlers were admitted. A year later, it's over 3,000. And by 1971, it's jumped all the way to almost 10,000. So yeah, it started out as a kind of cautious experiment, but it was pretty clear it was working.
Okay, so this brings us to the big, crucial question, right? The laws are gone. But what about the ideology, the mindset that propped them up for more than 70 years? Does any of that still hang around in modern Australia?
I mean, the policy itself is dead, no question. But did the ideology that created it just vanish when the laws did? Well, that's where things get a lot more complicated.
So, some academics will argue that you can still hear echoes of that old ideology in today's immigration debates. They'll point to things like the Tampa affair back in 2001, or the fact that both major political parties have supported offshore processing for refugees. And, of course, they bring up the rhetoric from politicians like Pauline Hanson, who famously warned that Australia was being swamped by Asians. But it's also really clear that those are minority viewpoints today. As the sources we looked at conclude, the vast majority of Australians now agree with that very first quote we saw. Multiculturalism isn't just a policy anymore. It's a core part of the national identity. And it's here to stay.
So, where does that leave us? I think the story of the White Australia policy is just this incredible reminder of how dramatically a nation's idea of itself can change. And it leaves us with a really big question, not just for Australia, but for any country with a complicated history. How do you square the ideals you were founded on with the nation you've become?